They never say natural person. They always say taxpayer or person, which is also an entity. The taxpayer entity, unfortunately for you, doesn't have a wallet. See, it's a fiction. It doesn't actually have any money. But the taxpayer entity has a liability. As soon as the taxpayer entity earns anything, the agreement is that the taxpayer entity will pay it. How do you get a fiction to pay it, though? A fiction doesn't pay anything. It's not real. It's made up. It's not your body. It's on a piece of paper, okay? It's just a piece of paper saying this is a taxpayer piece of paper. Okay, well, who's the trustee of it? Well, guess what? You're the trustee of your piece of paper saying you're a taxpayer. Well, you, as a natural person, earn money. You're the one who actually has real money in your pocket. Well, because you're the trustee, you, unfortunately, have to take it out of your pocketbook to pay this liability. And if you don't pay that liability as the trustee, you're responsible. You have a legal obligation to do so. And if you have a legal obligation and you don't take care of it, as David Wood Miller says, they put you in a box. And you know what that box is? It has lots of bars around it. So why am I walking around today and I don't pay income tax? I'm not in a box. Because you have to understand how the law works. And you have to understand exactly how they got you into it, and you have to know the steps to remove yourself from it. I'm going to explain that to you, but I also want you to understand it's not easy to do in terms of this up here. Okay? For some of us, 30, 40, 50 years of being trained the right way, for them, looking at it the right way, it's really hard to turn around and realize that, first of all, you've been lied to. Second of all, you're too smart to have been tricked that easily. And the third thing is that if nobody else is doing it, it must be illegal. That's the big one. You're going to go to jail. I'm just going to sit back and pay my taxes for the rest of my life because I'm a good citizen. And that's why I always say, though, to people that if it's against your conscience of what I'm teaching you, then don't do it. I'm here to open your eyes. That's all I'm here to do. I'm not here to force anybody to do something against their beliefs. How do you get out of being a trustee for a taxpayer fiction? Now let's see if I make sure I covered it. Yeah, okay. What you have to do is you have to file what's known as a constructive notice. And I'm putting a lot of things in capital letters here, not because there are fictions. I'm just putting it up here because I write capital letters easier on a board, okay? So don't read in too much into that. A constructive notice is basically a form of trespass warning. It is not a silver bullet. A lot of you have heard the word constructive notice, and you think that piece of paper in and of itself is going to solve everything. It's not going to solve everything. What it does is it puts on paper what you already know up here and believe in here. Otherwise, it doesn't work where it's squat. All it does is say, I know what's going on. I refuse to be part of this game. I refuse to be an entity. I'm removing myself as a taxpayer entity, and I'm taking back my natural person status, and a natural person is not subject to income tax. A constructive notice, and by the way, I don't have constructive notices to hand out, but they're available on my website and stuff, so I'll give you all that information afterwards. But it's just a one-page statement saying that you refuse to be, and you really refuse to be a taxpayer, and you know what's going on. What it falls under is contract fraud. And this is a very important point, because to remove yourself from being a taxpayer effectively in Canada, you cannot do it waiting for legislation or a judicial decision or a constitutional decision. It will not work. People have been waiting a long, long time. What you actually have to do is be aware, first of all, that there has been a fraud perpetrated upon you under contract law. If you realize there is a fraud perpetrated upon you, even if you have been a victim of this fraud for 20 years, did you know under international law there is no statute of limitations for fraud? You can't say, oh, it's been 7 years since you've been conned, so it's too bad, now you're in it. No, there is no statute of limitations. Therefore, it does not matter if you've been a taxpayer for 32 years. If you find out that there is fraud according to contract law, you have the right to void a contract agreement. In this case, what they call an assumed contract or a sumsit. There's one thing we have to make very, very clear. There is no such thing as a true income tax contract. It is an assumed contract based on the fact that you have become an entity. But you don't actually have an income tax contract. There's nothing you actually sign saying, I agree to be a taxpayer. The reason that you have what is called a sumsit or assumed is that the first time you ever fill out a tax return, this is what turns your status from a natural person into a quote-unquote taxpayer entity. You agree to be a taxpayer because the moment you fill out a T1 and sign it, you've now agreed to the income tax regulations. The income tax regulations state that you have agreed to be a taxpayer. And therefore, you are assumed to have agreed to a contract. A sumsit or assumed contracts are not valid under contract law. They were banned in 1677. You cannot use that today. If you are going to have any kind of economic transaction, in other words, money going from one party to another party, it has to fall under contract. Everything today is under contract. Or every kind of economic transaction, I should say, is under contract. And it doesn't matter if I'm simply going ahead and say, here, you want to take this pen? And you say, yeah, go ahead. Well, just take it. Okay, as soon as I do that, did you know that falls under contract? There's an agreement here. There's offer, acceptance, and compliance. Thank you. I'm terrible with these words. So offer, acceptance, compliance. It's done. It's an agreement. It's a contract. And it doesn't matter if it's income tax or handing you a pen. It all falls under contract law, and the government knows this. What they wanted to do was to keep you ignorant. I mean, back then, they said, well, why don't we just remove the educational system which allows people to understand simple things like basic contract law? They don't have to know that. Oh, we can get a real estate agent to know that because they need it, but otherwise, why bother? You remove the education, and people don't understand something as simple as you can't allow that under contract law. Now, this was figured out by Eldon Warman in 1985. Eldon Warman's from Calgary, for those who don't know, and he's actually become my mentor. And I learned everything I needed to learn from him, and I've taken it from there and gone across the country and been teaching this information to thousands of people now. And he figured out in 1985, and he stopped paying income tax in 1985. He started teaching it publicly in 1988. Ever since then, he's never filed an income tax return. And in fact, I know many people who have been now that have come out of the woodwork that have been out of the income tax system since the 60s and the 70s on the same basis. They voided their contract. Revenue Canada had no authority. So if Eldon Warman has never had to pay or never had to file an income tax return since 1985, I'm thinking, okay, there's got to be some validity to it. And then when I spoke with Eldon, he says, you know what? I've been teaching this to thousands of people, and there's been tons of people that have been getting out of the system. And I would say out of the thousands upon thousands upon thousands of Canadians who have now served constructive notice, and I know there's a number in this room right now that have done the same thing. A smile on his face. There's quite a few in this room, actually, that have been working with me and getting out of the system. I would say there's probably been no more than 10 or 11 court cases. And all of them have other reasons to be there. The court cases were not based on the constructive notice. They were based on weaknesses on the person's ability to protect themselves or the fact that they were already in court fighting the income tax system. But what we've been finding more and more is that people have been serving constructive notice, getting out of the system. The only thing the government has been able to do and is doing so far is to try and get CCRA to go in and try and steal their property. Now, I use the word property in the proper sense of the term. Everything you own is property, including your money, including your body, including your mind. Okay, it's all property. So the government has been using CCRA to steal property, but you know what? They haven't been trying to force people to file a tax return because they know that this is valid. And if they go ahead and expose this too much, then other people are going to go, oh, what's going on here? Maybe we should find out what's happening, and it's going to open the floodgates. However, I did find out from a source in Revenue Canada that currently, as of about a month ago, Revenue Canada has now been tracking people who have opted out of the tax system. They used to track it in hard numbers, what was like hundreds of people or thousands of people. It's now reaching the point where they're tracking it as a percentage of Canada's population. Yeah. That's why those guys are out there with rifles on me. It's gotten huge, okay? And I'm not the reason why it happened, but I'm definitely one of the people that's helping it grow. It's also people in this room that I know are helping others to learn about it. It's all part of everybody helping everybody else. There's not one person standing up there and saying, okay, I'm going to teach you everything. We don't do it that way. And that's why it's been growing so big. The other thing I also found out from Revenue Canada is that I actually had a friend named Randy who called up Revenue Canada, and I don't think I put this out in a newsletter, but he called Revenue Canada and asked them about untaxing. He says, well, I want to untax myself. He actually called Revenue Canada. I couldn't believe it. The Victoria office. And he says, oh, so what do you have to say about it? I love that. Randy, I said, you got guts, man. I said, oh, shit, somebody else should have done that. And he says, wait till, and he put this in an email to me. Well, I called Revenue Canada up, and the lady says, well, we're not at liberty to talk about that. So he says, okay, well, can you talk about it off the record? And she goes, well, okay, since you asked, I'll talk about it off the record. And he says, okay, so what are you doing? I mean, I'm really seriously thinking about it, but I don't want to cause any problems, so what's going on? And the Revenue Canada lady told Randy, well, yeah, we know it's happening out there, but we can't really do anything about it. We can't stop it because there's nothing we can actually legally do to stop the movement. So he says, well, what happens with me then? She goes, well, I mean, you're free to go ahead, but I know they're working on something. And he says, what's that? He says, well, we can't stop the people, but so we're trying to figure out a way to stop the leader. Yeah, which one? Exactly. And I started laughing about that. I said, you know what? They can say whatever they want. I think what they're doing is their propaganda towards their internal people, trying to make them feel better. Well, we'll stop the leader, then it'll be all over. And you guys, who read my Wednesday newsletter before you came up here about the new changes with the income tax? I don't know where it's heading, but Bruce, you might want to talk about that on Sunday. I'm actually going to be calling David Wynn Miller on Sunday. He left a message for me yesterday, and he said to call him on Sunday. I'm going to ask him that question, or maybe we'll bring it up. There's some possible changes to the Income Tax Act of Canada coming up in the year 2001 for exactly the reasons that I'm talking about this today with you, because this movement is growing exponentially. There's many ways to opt out of the... technically, you can say there's more than one way to opt out of the system. One way is to simply disappear. If they can't find you, they got nothing on you. Okay, I know people that have done that. One guy says, since 1968, I haven't been paying taxes. I said, really? What'd you do? Sir, constructor? He goes, no, I just changed my name and I never found another one again. They never found me. Well, okay, well, I guess a good option, I guess, if you want. But there's more than one way. I understand you give them more power than they actually have. And one of the reasons you give them more power is because you play their game in their system. Right, Larry? Exactly. So if you don't play their game in their system, if you want to go in your rut this way and then you want to go this way and you're going back and forth, they know exactly where you're going. They can predict it. But all of a sudden, if you go this way, they go, where'd the guy go? So you're over here, and they're looking for you back there. It's understanding. You actually get to have some fun with this. Don't take it too seriously. But you have to do one thing. Actually, Vern, were you going to comment on something just now?
I was, because I was talking to Dave the other day.
Yeah.
They actually had the act right in front of them that is going into practice on January the 1st, 2001. One of the features of which is that the employers will no longer have to deduct that source.
Yes.
And that surprises me, because nowhere at any time do they ever pass a law that is in our favor, so there must be another...
There's a reason behind it. Yeah, I was saying that Bill 459. You were going to say something.
That is a bill that's been presented by a Saskatchewan MP from the Alliance Group.
Oh, is that what it is? Okay.
It's a non-member's bill, and you know what happens to non-members' bill.
They die out. Okay. Yeah, he's saying Bill 459 is coming in saying that employers don't have to withhold any more at source. And that's all it said, basically. And I was really surprised. And it died out, actually, because it died out for the summer reading. It might be presented in the fall again. We'll see what happens. I put it in my newsletter. I made a comment on it. But there is always something going on. Never take anything at face value that we hear from Revenue Canada. One more thing I have to explain to you. A lot of people don't understand this. They look at CCRA and they go, we have an agreement with CCRA to pay taxes. No, you don't. You actually have an agreement or an assumed agreement with the Minister of National Revenue in Ottawa, whose minister is currently Martin Cochin, to pay taxes, or your entity does. Revenue Canada, or CCRA, is not who you pay taxes to. They're a private agency that has been contracted by the Minister of National Revenue to collect the money from that entity. You, being the trustee, unfortunately has to deal with them. We have to understand these, it sounds like small distinctions, but they're not. See, we fight against CCRA. They are nothing more than a collection agency. You treat them like any other collection agency, and you'll start getting a better understanding of what's going on. It's just that they don't feel like they have to follow any rules or rule of law in order to get their money. CCRA was never controlled by the federal government. CCRA has always been controlled by the Rothschilds, Revenue Canada. They've always done that. It was brought in because of the Rothschilds, who actually control the Bank of Canada and who actually implemented the income tax system in the backroom dealings, were the ones that wanted to find a way to make sure and ensure that the Government of Canada did not renege on its deal. So they are the ones that actually brought in Revenue Canada / CCRA. It's not a government agency, never has been. Don't ever let them fool you in that one. So what you're dealing with is an international banking cartel's collection agency, because the money goes straight to them. So do not feel like you are paying anything. When you pay income tax, this is exactly what it is. They're stealing from you. It does not go to support your country. It never has. This was set up as a way to rob you. It keeps you in slavery. Everybody that pays income tax, we've been lied to constantly, so we believe that income tax is here to support our country. It is not. These people who work for CCRA are ignorant. I don't hold any grudges against anybody. I don't call them evil. They have a job to do. They think they're doing what's in their best interest of the country. Believe it or not, these people might be your neighbors. Some of them are very, very good people.
Name one.
I was being nice. Most of them are not good people. But again, I don't want to put us in different camps. Because really what it comes down to, when you look at it from the most spiritual level, we're all in the same boat. We're in a game. You have to know where it goes and who is pulling the strings. So as long as you realize that your income taxes were never meant to pay for any services whatsoever, and please don't ever say who's going to pay for the roads. Look at Wes's place. Who paid for that road? I got to pay for that out of my pocket change. It's terrible. The last big road we ever paid for was the Coquihalla, and we paid a toll for it. Did they ever get rid of the toll? No. Come on, folks. It doesn't work that way. They don't pay for roads. And you know what I find really funny? The first thing people ask me, well, who's going to pay for the roads? And then I'm thinking, okay, your grandmother's in the hospital right now dying of Alzheimer's, and you're worried about the roads? Then they go, oh, then the hospitals. Okay. Roads are more important than hospitals. It tells you where your priorities are. Eh? My car is first, then my grandmother in hospital second. I just want to point that out, okay, because I always get that. Roads first. And I don't see any roads being built with all the trillions of dollars that we're giving them. So it's all because we've been, when you say, who's going to pay for the roads, who tells you that? The newspapers tell you that. So that's where you get your opinions from. You get it from, and when I say you, I mean a collective you, okay? I'm not criticizing anybody in this audience, because you guys are way, way further down the road in understanding this than most Canadians. I'm saying you or we as a collective we. When we talk about understanding our opinions, they come from the media, and the media is controlled completely. They only give you what is important for you to know based on their agenda. They will not give you any alternatives whatsoever. So they'll always tell you, well, they'll always complain about income tax, because what they want in the National Post or the Vancouver Sun or anything like that is they actually want you to complain about taxes. What does that do? It's a side issue. It distracts you from the real problem. If you complain about taxes, what are you going to do? You're just going to keep on complaining about it. You're not actually going to do anything about it. You're just going to complain about it. And you're going to try and change the politicians. So what do they do? Okay, then they complain about the politicians. Well, it gives you another opinion to talk about. Yeah, the NDP's better, or the Alliance is better, or this is better, or they're not, they're worse. Actually, it's usually worse, not better. And so they're giving you another side issue. So, okay, I'm complaining about taxes, so let's change the politicians and they'll fix the taxes. Politicians, media, taxes, all of this is controlled. Everything is controlled, and yet we're being given our opinions. They're handed to us. We don't have to think for ourselves. if you see how everything has been put into place so nicely that people like us are causing a real stir, and it doesn't take very much. You know, it takes 2 to 3% of the population to know what's going on to shut down our entire system. And you know, I'll tell you right now, if income taxes stopped tomorrow, our country would not shut down. All it would mean was the international bankers can go where they should be going, which is very down south. Okay? All we would have to do is go back to printing Dominion of Canada notes again. We're not Dominion of Canada anymore, so we just call it Canada dollars or whatever you want to call it. The government would go back to printing it again. And the Bank of Canada, by the way, is a conglomerate of banks. It is not a government agency. It never was. And it is actually controlled by the Rothschilds. I found this out from a banker. One of their little secrets they don't tell you about. The Rothschild family actually created the Bank of Canada in a backroom deal with their banks, with our particular banks. Okay. Another thing I want to tell you about is the social insurance number. A lot of people also I want you to, oh, was that a hummingbird? Wow. I thought it was a giant bee. I was freaking for a second. Bye. Yeah, mosquito around here they would be. Watch out for tonight's mosquitoes. Hoo-wee. Do you guys understand what a social insurance number is? It's not the same thing as a social security number in the United States. A SIN number, which is why they call it a SIN number, I love that, is quite different than a social security. And by the way, social security, when you it sounds like a snake. Well, they both have their word. It's not the same thing. At least it isn't right now. A social insurance number was brought in when Canada was much more innocent. In the 1950s, I think it was brought in. 60, 70? 67 was brought in? Okay. It was brought in to manage the Canada Pension Plan. It was brought in as a way of tracking Canada Pension Plan payments. That's all it was meant to be used for. But of course, as soon as they give you a number, now they want to be able to use it for tracking and everything. And you know, according to current legislation, you are not obligated to give your SIN number to anybody else, including the government, unless it's used for Canada pension purposes. That's the only purpose. When people ask you for your social insurance number and they tell you you're not going to get a bank account or anything of that nature without it, that's against the law. That's against the regulations. It's for if you ever mention it, I cannot and I will not give my social insurance number based on privacy reasons and fraud reasons. They cannot tell you you have to.
What law states that or what act?
Privacy Act. And in fact, even the Social Insurance Number Act, the actual act that brought it in, says that you should not be giving for anything else. It is your right not to. Yeah, you have to give a SIN number for a WCB hearing test, right? Totally against. Yeah, and that's not true. They understand that when you have ignorant people dealing with ignorant people, then everybody thinks they're all right. Everybody's right. I'm right. They're ignorant. They don't have a clue. The government tells you, oh yeah, you can go ahead and do that, even though it's completely breaking the law, and then an ignorant person tells another ignorant person, the ignorant person goes, okay, I'll give it to you because I guess you know what you're doing because you're WCB. And WCB is composed of a bunch of ignorant people, just like the rest of everybody else out there, okay? So we're all going, duh, 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 bah, 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 bah. Whatever. Social Security number, however, is a little bit interesting. Social Security number is actually, because there are actually two United States. There's a corporate United States, and there's a constitutional United States. And American citizens are actually born as sovereign U.S. citizens on the continental U.S. based on the Constitution. But when you get a Social Security number in the United States, you actually become a shareholder, or not shareholder, actually more like a citizen. I should just keep it simple. You become a citizen of the corporation of the United States, which is based in Washington, D.C., which is a legal fiction. And a Social Security number makes you a corporate entity immediately. And this is where the taxpayers in the United States are locked in for life. They're not locked in. Sovereign U.S. citizens don't have to pay income tax. If you never take a Social Security number, you never have to pay income tax. You're sovereign. You take a Social Security number, you become part of the corporation of the United States. And that's a whole different ballgame. Now they've got you. And in the United States, by the way, is the only country in the world where you pay income tax based on your citizenship, not your residency. It's the only country, except for the Philippines. The Philippines was a U.S. protectorate. They set up their income tax system the same way. How nice. So the Philippines and the United States, the only two countries in the world where your citizenship matters. You can live in any other country, don't matter. You have to still pay still have to pay U.S. income taxes. In Canada, because it is an agreement converting you to a taxpayer, it's based on your residency. But there is legislation currently in the works to make the SIN number into a FIN number, which is a federal identification number, federal ID number. You know what they're trying to do? That's what they're going for. They're under pressure from the Americans, and I don't mean Americans as in American people, I mean Americans as in the international banking who is in charge of the Federal Reserve System. They're not too happy with Canada not having this system. There's legislation right now. They're going to change it to a federal identification number. They're going to ask you, they're going to force you to give your kids this number, otherwise your kids can't participate in society. If you want a passport, you need this. If you want to send to school, you need this. That's the beginning of the end for Canadian sovereignty, okay? Right now, we can get our sovereignty much easier than the Americans can, much easier. Because with Americans, with this SSN number, if you don't have one, you can't participate in society at all. So in other words, they remove it all from you because the entire society is a fiction. It's all corporate. You want to participate in the corporate? You can't be a sovereign. You have to be a corporate body. You have to be a fiction in order to participate in our society. Otherwise, you're a hermit. So they force you into it. In Canada, you can tell people where to go right now with this. Well, unfortunately, with this one here, which will probably happen within a few years, probably 3 years, your children are going to be told that they have to get it from birth. I can see it coming. You know how they're starting it? I can tell you why it's happening, because it's always, as David Icke says, what does he say? It's problem, reaction, solution, okay? This is exactly what's going on. Well, we're not quite doing it the same way here, but if you don't follow the same 3 words, but it does give you the same principle. Right now, you're being given, and Canadians, it's totally different. They never cause you a problem. What they do is they give you a benefit. It's not a problem, it's a benefit. Benefit, reaction, solution. I don't know why we do that. We're always doing benefits. How we do it? With our children right now, what they're doing is they're giving us an opportunity to get $400 a year towards our child's education if you get them a social insurance number. Wow. So it's not a problem, it's a benefit. And Canadians love benefits. Give me benefits. We are totally, we might as well be just retired already because we're all looking for our benefits. If you're 65 and you've earned it, that's different. How many people at 22 want their benefits already? Okay, they don't actually want to do anything, they want to get their benefits. So that's what they're trying to do right now. They're preparing us. While the kids are already getting all these little social insurance numbers, try to give one back. You know you can't. I got somebody who got a social insurance number for their two-year-old. 2-year-old. What do you need a social insurance number? Well, you know, the educational thing. See how easy it is? And now they know. It's a little late now. So he says, well, what can I do? I said, well, we're going to send a notice back saying that you're worried about fraud and you don't want the SIN number because you're never going to use it. You decided against the educational thing. We'll see what happens. So we're going to try sending it in and see what happens. But I've heard of other people who've tried to send in a SIN number back and they say, sorry, we can't take it back. It's attached to you till the day you die. Well, with this one here, they're going to expect your children to have it. Okay, and that means they're going to track you right from birth to death with your federal ID number. Want to do anything? Want to open a bank account? Want to get a car? Want to buy anything? Federal ID number, you need it. You are now in a corporate jurisdiction. Canada has long since stopped being a sovereign country. We are a corporation today. But unfortunately for the government, there are people that are regaining their sovereignty and saying we don't have to be part of this corporation. They don't really like it, so they're trying to find a way to resolve it. Now, have I given you enough of this red pill stuff? Whew. Let's talk about how to write your name. If you have 2 names and you want to, oops, that's terrible. Start again. Okay, that's me here. I'm signing my name, not very well there because I'm writing on a board. A lot of people know how to write their name like this. You got it right there. Thanks to Kobe telling me that, because I had it in capital letters first thing this morning, because she goes, oh, you're writing it as an entity. Oh yeah, rip. Do it again. What I did here is I signed my name as a natural person, and by using specific technology, language technology, I made it obvious that I am a fact, a noun, not a verb or a fiction. A fiction, what is that again? That's a corporate entity, capital letters. But if you scrawl your name like this, you are not a natural person. You are an entity. That is an entity signature. It can be whatever. It doesn't make any difference. Although I want to clarify one thing. You do not sign your name like this if you are agreeing to be an entity. If you are not agreeing to be an entity, you sign your name like this. If you don't care that you're an entity, you can sign it in whatever way your normal signature is. It doesn't make any difference. Please do not go to your bank account, or your bank, I should say, and redo your signature card for your checking account like this. Because a bank account is an entity. It is not a bad entity, it's just an entity. That's why it's in capital letters on your checks. It is an entity. You're agreeing to become one. But if you sign your name like this, what you're actually saying is that I, the natural person, am allowing the jurisdiction of the entity to take control of me as a natural person. No. Understand the difference, okay? So on your bank accounts, don't worry about your signature card. We're going to go more into this actual.